All right, guys. So you have been sending me all kinds of requests to look at your tests, and I appreciate that. And I've been going through them, and I'm getting a lot of the same questions. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through these 1 through 5. You can go back on your test questions that you've given and then see, did I add all of these things, or are there some things that I'm missing? Okay. So the first question here says, describe the Great Plains prior to the building of the Transcontinental Railroad and the passage of the Homestead Act. And I'm not seeing anybody who's really getting this wrong. So that's a really good thing. You're talking about Native Americans. You're talking about what they hunted. Talking about that they lived nomadic lifestyles. You're talking a few people about property, which is fantastic, and then like what the roles of men and women were. So question 1, I don't really have any concerns with it because that looks really good. Now question 2, it's this looks like it's the same question, describe the Great Plains, but it says after the building of the Transcontinental Railroad and then the passage of the Homestead Act. All right, so since we're talking about the plains, I'm not really asking you about Native Americans per se. You could definitely tell me how Native Americans were forced off the land and then onto reservations. That's completely acceptable. That's great, actually. But what I'm looking for really is settlement of the plains, okay, and how that's tied into the Transcontinental Railroad. Because remember, you go from 6 months to like a couple of days to get there, and then the passage of the Homestead Act specifically. I mean, it's government selling land really cheaply, and you have to do 3 things to get a deed. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, more than like the horrors that Native Americans experienced. You can definitely include that. I don't have any issues with that. That's great. But focus on Transcontinental Railroad, Homestead Act. Okay, I include these Transcontinental Railroad and Homestead Act up here, so that you get a context for prior. So it's prior to settlement. Okay. Three is also going well. It says, why did African Americans migrate west from southern states in the 1870s? All right, so most of you have found the gentleman that I was referencing, but this is the thing right here. Why? Why did African Americans go to the west? He led them there, but something's going on in the South. Okay, way back at the beginning of the class, we talked about Reconstruction, and we talked about how if you were an African American male living in the South from 1865 to 1877, your experience was, I'm not going to say it's great, that's for sure, but you're able to vote. You are able to run for office. There are black mayors, black sheriffs, black senators. So but something happens. We've talked about this a few times. First, you have the economic depression of 73, and then you have the election of 76. Now, you don't have to include that stuff, but more to the point, what's going on in the South? Like, what's happening to African Americans that they would be like, I would rather live out west, like starting over. And remember, the West is not an easy place to live. I mean, there's locusts and drought and fire and all kinds of stuff, right? But they would still rather endure that than stay in the South, okay? Think about the Klan. Think about the violence that's going on down in the South, okay? That's where I'm kind of going with that. 4, how did the railroads help open the West? First, please do not be the person that writes they connected the East Coast to the West Coast. Like I told you last time, that's not the answer on the last test. This is specific, okay? It's the West. This is not the Great Plains. This is the West. So the West includes New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Utah, and we'll say California. Okay, that's the West. What was it that the railroads did that allowed these places to open up? Meaning people move there. Okay, this is they're not farming in the West. They're farming up here in the Great Plains. Okay. The West, though, remember they've got those longhorns. That's a huge clue for you. Plus, besides ranching, before we even talked about ranching, actually, we talked about mining. So that's what I'm going for, is talk to me about mining and ranching. What happened to the towns? What happened to cattle trails? What happened where the cattle trails met the railroads? That kind of thing. That's where I was going with that. And the 5th question, what economic problems confronted American farmers in the 1890s? I haven't seen really anybody get this question wrong, but there's some stuff that's missing from it. Specifically, you want to talk about money. You want to talk about the fact that the wealthy people want us to adopt a gold standard, right? And those are the people that are out in the Midwest and the East Coast. But the farmers didn't like that. They wanted silver. Okay, that's one thing. So it's about money. The other is how does taking money out of the economy hurt farmers because they owe banks money? Okay, we talked about that. You're looking for inflation and deflation specifically. It's also in the reading. And then the last thing that you definitely would want to include with this economic problem is what the railroads are doing to the farmers for hauling their freight. And we talked about that in class. And it's also in the reading too. Okay, so I mean, things look good. You want this to be as best as possible. So there you go. Thank you.